The last thing Brooke remembered before slipping into unconsciousness was the weight of exhaustion pressing against her body. It had been an ordinary day in her Long Island home, a life lived for herself, with no thought of the divine, no expectation of what lay beyond. But the moment she closed her eyes, reality as she knew it shattered. A searing force erupted in the sky, splitting it in two. Fire rained down in balls of molten light, moving at an incomprehensible speed. At first, they were no larger than marbles, but in an instant, they grew vast, engulfing the entire horizon. Before she could run, before she could scream, the fire came straight for her. It consumed her. A sensation unlike anything she had ever known coursed through her body. The fire wasn't just burning her flesh, it was penetrating her soul, stripping away everything she had ever been. She convulsed violently, the intensity of it too much for her human form to endure. The pain was overwhelming, yet within it, there was something else, something ancient, something holy. She was being lifted. The world she had always known faded into nothingness, and suddenly, she found herself weightless, suspended in an expanse of shimmering light. Layers of her existence peeled away like old skin, and for the first time, she saw herself. Not just the person she had been in the physical world, but the truth of her being, raw and exposed. A golden glow stretched out before her, and through it, a city emerged, a city unlike any she had ever imagined. The streets were not paved with stone or concrete, but with something that pulsed like living light. Structures of exquisite detail lined the skyline, each one a masterpiece of divine artistry. And then, as her vision cleared, she realized she was standing at the entrance of an enormous mansion. There were no doors, only grand archways decorated with gilded carvings. Brooke stepped forward, her bare feet touching what felt like warm, liquid gold. She passed through the entrance, and a gasp escaped her lips. Angels. At least, that was what she assumed they were. They looked like glorified beings, human in form, yet somehow different, radiant, perfect. Their eyes held no sorrow, no burdens, only joy, peace, and an unshakable freedom. The air was thick with music, not from instruments, but from the very essence of creation itself. Every breath she took was a song, every movement a note in a celestial symphony. Then, she felt it. The presence. It was everywhere, within her and around her. A force so mighty yet so tender that her spirit recognized it before her mind did. She did not need to be told. She knew. This was the presence of the King, majesty itself. Brooke fell to her knees, trembling, as a wave of recognition washed over her. Tears streamed down her face. She had spent her life doubting, dismissing, living for herself. Yet here, in this moment, she was nothing more than a child before her father. Through the archways, beyond the mansion, the skyline expanded into infinite beauty. Towering structures of glass and gold stretched into the heavens. But it was the sky that held her breath still. The clouds began to shift, coming together as if commanded by an unseen force. They formed a face that held eternity in its gaze. The moment she saw it, every part of her being surrendered. God. No one had to say his name. No one had to announce it. Her spirit bore witness to his spirit, and for the first time, she understood. She was a child of God. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision began to shift. A different force pulled at her, dragging her downward. The warm glow of heaven faded, and something darker, something deceptive, seeped into her reality. She was back in the physical world, but something had changed. 3 days later, she found herself standing in the midst of a Billy Graham meeting in Brooklyn. The echoes of heaven still burned in her chest, the weight of the presence still pressing against her heart. And in that moment, as the invitation was given, she surrendered. She sealed the deal. But just as swiftly as she had embraced the truth, something tried to rip it from her grasp. A dream came to her in the night. Unlike the first, this one was laced with something sinister. She stood in Jerusalem, a city that should have felt holy, but there was something off. A man stood in the distance, his presence magnetic, his beauty nearly unbearable to look at. He held 2 stone tablets, and as he raised them toward the sky, electric signals pulsed from them, stretching over the entire skyline. Brooke hesitated. There was something wrong. But before she could turn away, her best friend, standing beside the man, called to her, "Brooke, come here. You have to see this." The force of the invitation was nearly impossible to resist. She inched forward, and the man extended one of the stone tablets toward her. The moment her fingers brushed against it, a jolt of energy surged through her, but it was not the energy of heaven. It was a counterfeit. An immediate wave of darkness crashed over her, a deception so powerful it almost swallowed her whole. She realized in that instant, this was the enemy, a force that looked like God, sounded like God, but was nothing like him. She awoke with a gasp, her body drenched in sweat. The battle was real. The war was for souls. She had nearly been deceived. The dream had been a warning. There were counterfeits in the world, spirits that mimicked the divine but were rooted in deception. And just as God had shown her the beauty of heaven, he was now revealing the danger of the enemy's lies. But Brooke had seen the truth. She had stood in the presence of God, and nothing, no dream, no counterfeit spirit, no deception, could take that away from her. Her life was never the same again. Her parents, once skeptical, listened as she shared her encounter. Her father, stunned, revealed something he had never told anyone. Decades before, while backpacking through Europe, he had a dream. Jesus came to him. He had dismissed it, but now, as he looked into his daughter's eyes, he knew it had been real. One by one, walls crumbled. Faith blossomed. Brooke's life became a testimony, a beacon. The supernatural wasn't just for the ancient texts. It was alive, moving, revealing the heart of God. And as the world grew darker, as sin and deception spread, one truth remained unshakable. Heaven is real, and so is the one who reigns over it.